Hello, welcome to today's edition of AI Playbook, and we're still talking about the series of ethical artificial intelligence. How can you implement an ethical artificial intelligence? What are the things to have in mind? Sometimes it is not about building these tools. Understanding what to cater for in the beginning will save you a lot of time. In fact, I can't really tell you about how many applications I've built in the past that currently now we are rebuilding them just because we miss out some steps. And if you want to keep your users safe, it is important that you cater for some of these things. So today we'll be looking at what it means to build a responsible artificial intelligence. What does it really mean to build something that is responsible that will last a taste of time? Okay, alright, so pretty much looking at it, there are a couple of things to think about when we talk about responsible artificial intelligence. The first thing is your AI needs to be responsible. It needs to be transparent. You need to be able to explain and put things at the forefront of the user and being able to really tell what is going on. So you need to find a way to ensure that your agent or whatever you're building is interpretable, something that everyone can understand. All right, and you also need to ensure that it's adaptable. Then you also need to ensure that the features are important and you can visualize them. So putting all of this into context, whatever you're doing, your technique, you need to be able to explain it. So take, for instance, I built a model that generates videos and I'm unable to explain how that really works. You've not done anything if you can really explain it. So you need to be able to explain how you get there, things that you get to do to achieve those things. Also, you need to have a clear communication strategies. You need to understand the techniques versus non-technical explanations. What are the things that needs to go into your documentations? What are the things that needs to go into the press? What are the things that needs to go within the organization? Things like this may look very, very, very little, but at the end of the day, they are very important. Then you need to understand the user approach to disclosure level. Who gets what? These are things that, on a norm, you can declare them at the very least of your development process, and they are very, very important. Now, what are the confidential level? What are the things that you can indicate to really make you know when something is confidential or when it is not? And what are the limitations to knowledge approach? What things do you use to train? What things do you retain as intellectual properties and things like that? All these things are very important when we talk about building a responsible artificial intelligence system. Moving on to the next point is you need to also understand human in the loop design. Whenever you're creating something that is artificial, you need to find a way to ensure that you balance between what is artificial and what is real. And one way to do this is you need to find a way to make somebody oversee what you're doing. You need to find a way to make sure that somebody at some point evaluate what is going on. There has to be an oversight mechanism, so, confidence threshold for review, escalation pathway. What happens when the machine says something or spill out something that is not supposed to say? Who gets the escalation? How do you react to it? And how do you override capabilities in situations where things are not going well? How do you ensure that you just, maybe shut down the entire system or make it unavailable in the meantime? How do you also understand or put out the decision logs and audits? What is going on as the machine makes decision at every point in time? Are you able to log those things so that the team can once in a while review those things and make sense out of them? All these things are very, very important. Also, interface consideration is one of it. You need to understand the alert design psychology, cognitive load management. How do you prevent errors, feedback collections? How do you display all of those things? Who gets to view them and how they get to view them? All of these things are very important. Now, once you consider the human in the loop design, another thing you need to consider is responsible AI governance. Now, we can't say this enough. All right, because at the end of the day, when we talk about AI governance, it sits at the heart of the organization. This is what governs what everybody gets to do, the ethics of the structures. We talk about the review board, and some of the things to put in place are the structures needed to achieve all of these things. You're looking at the ethic committee, review board, stakeholder representation, the external auditor relationship. All those people have a role to play, and even you may not have them at the beginning, but it's important that you have a plan for them. So as your projects scale, either into production, you're just bringing all these documents out to implement them along the way. And the cool thing about that is the fact that you had planned them in the beginning. It makes your life whole easy because whatever implementation you're doing technically are already aligning with whatever you're going to be setting up along the way, which makes it a lot of fun while building something like that. Another thing to understand is the policy framework, adaptable use guide, development standard. What are your development standard? In most cases, you call it design system. You can call it AI design system if you want. What are the development standard, deployment checklist, and all of that? Your continuous monitoring requirements. What do you get to do on a regular basis to ensure that you're constantly looking at what this AI is doing and how you can further improve the system. Now, once you have a responsible AI governance, another thing to consider is the risk management approach. Now, talking about the risk management approach, let's look at some models, some risk assessment models. You need to understand the impact severity. What happens? You need to be able to measure, when so thing happened, the severity is number 10. When so thing happened, the severity is number 2, and things like that. Probability estimation. What are the possibility of something happening? You need to be able to ascertain all of that. Then the risk categorization framework as well. How do you also mitigate the strategy to come up with something that would help in mitigating some of these things? So these are items to pay close attention to your mitigation strategy development. And once you're done with that very category, something else to also consider is your ongoing monitoring. How do you ensure that you do that? One way, some things to put aside to be able to do that is performance drift detection. How do you just detect when the AI isn't feeling fine and you need to fix it? All right, so also feedback analysis. When you get those feedback, how do you analyze them? You also need to be clear as to that. Then environment change assessments. Sometimes the policy space may change, things may change. Assessing all of those things and making impacts or adjusting some things to the current day trend will really help. Also, periodic assessment protocol. What do you get to do? And at the end of the whole thing, what you need to have here is your ethical AI implementation. So your ethical AI implementation blueprints, something that really help you to categorize what is good and what is not good. Once you're done having something around this risk as management approach, another thing to take a look at is your ethical AI assessment tool. What are the tools you're going to be using to assess all of these things? The first is evaluation framework. And in these, you need to ensure that framework help you to manage bias and fairness. How do you manage bias and fairness? This is very important. Your framework needs to be able to cover that. Privacy compliance measurements is another thing. Transparency and explainability assessment, human oversight evaluation, accountability mechanism review. All these things are things that your evaluation framework should cover. Now, after doing that, you also need to understand the scoring methodology. In your scoring methodology framework, you need to also understand that it should have maturity model approach. As the AI gets to grow, your benchmark, of course, should ascertain or embody that growth, and you should be able to also quantify what is going on at every level. You also need to have a benchmark comparison. Comparing things when it comes to artificial intelligence is very important, because if you cannot measure it, you can't improve it, or you can't even tell if something is getting better. Another thing to also look at is your progress tracking. What's impact? What's progress are you making along the way? All these things are very important. Once you have your ethical AI assessment tool and framework organized, let's look at the final point in this segment, which is creating your ethical AI roadmap in general. Now, putting all of these things together at the organization level, there has to be a strategy, which of course entails something like your current state of assessment. What is currently going on? Oftentimes people get to adapt to AI independently without even the organization knowing. Oftentimes we use tools, we use assessment that the organizations are not aware of. But at the end of the day, we need to make all of these assessments and being able to tell what is required. Gap analysis: what training do you need? What facilities do you need? What tools do you need? What intellectual capacity do you need? And things like that. Then you need to also understand that there has to be a way of prioritizing and identification as well. When you identify all of these things, of course, you can't solve everything at once. You need to prioritize what comes first and things like that. Once you prioritize, then you talk about your resource allocation planning. How do you allocate your resources within the scope and what needs to be done? One way to look at the implementation planning is to look at your short-term actions, which can be within 30 to 90 days. You can also look at your medium-term actions or medium-term initiative, which can be within 3 to 6 months, and long-term transformation within 6 to 18 months. And of course, all of these things have to go in line with your success metrics. If you put all of these things together and you're able to come up with your ethical AI roadmap, it will really help. It's going to tell the developers, the engineering team when to take decision and when not to. It's more like, just look at it as the manual or the moment of truth, something that tells them what to do and what not to do. APIs to talk to and API not to talk to. Things to consider when they are constructing technologies and things like that. Putting all of this together, you would see that it is important that every organization that wants to be AI driven deserve an AI ethical roadmap. If you don't have it, then you're just building and you're likely to either face regulatory issues or building something that is not ethical, or you're not even doing something that is healthy to your organization in the long run. Like I said, rather than building something and have to rebuild it again in future because of something not done right, it is better that you get your foundation right. And that's how we wrap it up on today's edition. If you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Ensure that you hit the bell so that you can be notified every time we release a new tip. And of course, if you haven't followed our social media handle, do that right now. My name remains Olatoye, and I'll see you in the next one.